All right, everyone. My name is Daniel Swore. Um, I'm doing this recording from Cloud Skill Gateway, and yeah, so I'm going to be covering today VPC, which is Virtual Private Cloud from our Amazon Web Services. And this tutorial is really just going to cover like how to create a custom VPC. Yeah, so we are going to jump into the management console. I'm in my management console here. So I'm gonna go to VPC. I'm gonna search for VPC. But before I really dive into this, I'm expecting that um, for those of you who have actually who are either doing the cloud already working as a cloud engineer or DevOps engineer, or who are in the IT industry, you are familiar with the concept of VPC. And for those of you who are wanting to learn or get into the cloud, and I'm not familiar with uh, this cloud concept, so I'm going to go over the basic. This is a high level tutorial. Um, and yeah, and I'm going to be posting this tutorial on my channel, so please feel free to subscribe on my channel. um, yeah, so but before we start, what is a VPC? So a VPC, like I said earlier, it stands for Virtual Private Cloud. When you sign up like this is AWS, Amazon Web Services. When you sign up for their service, for their account, you get a free tier. And in this free tier, um, you can create resources like VPC and different resources. And I think this free tier is for like 1 year. But what's really we are covering today is VPC, and VPC is just a slice of AWS, their cloud. They give you a slice of what their cloud. So, but this one is private. It's specifically to you. It's given to you, and you can have up to 5 VPCs in a region. So 5 VPCs. So right now, I have 2 VPCs right now here. And so we're going to be creating this VPC. And all we are doing today for this tutorial is to create, so there are different ways you can create a VPC. This one we are doing it manually, but you can also create a VPC through the CLI, the command line interface. You can create VPC using Terraform. You can create, and for those of you who do not know what Terraform is, this is Terraform. So this is Terraform. This is not a VPC, but this is Terraform. So you can create a VPC using this one. You can create a VPC using CloudFormation templates. CloudFormation is a service, it's a infrastructure as code specifically for AWS. You can create VPC using CDK. But yeah, so we are going to be doing it manually here, and we are going to create VPC with all 8 components. We're not going to create the component individually. That will be a total a different video. So today we are just creating a VPC here. So to create a VPC, after you search for the VPC here, just type VPC in the search bar here, and then it will show up here. So for me, I just star it so it appears on my, when you start it like this, it will appear on the task bar, here, and then you can just, like right here, this is the VPC, you can just click on it here. Or the other way, you can also look for VPC. You can just go to services, and then you go under networking. You find networking. Where is networking? Networking and content delivery. Under networking and content delivery, you see the last one here is VPC. So you just, yeah, so that's, yeah. So without more talk, let's do the demo. So go on VPC. So right now I have 3 VPCs. I have 2 VPCs on this in this region. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna go to create a VPC. You just click on create VPC on the top right hand corner here, and then it will give you an interface like this. And then you have 2 options here, resources to create. So under resources to create, you have 2 options. You have VPC only, and then you have VPC and more. So for this demo, we're going to do VPC and more. My next video, I'll create VPC only. If we say VPC only, it's only going to create the VPC. But that's just, if you create just a VPC, it's not going to do anything for you. You know, it's not going to do anything because it doesn't have all the components like internet gateway, route table, subnet, so it doesn't have all these components that it will need for it to be able to perform a function for you. So today I'm doing this tutorial to create VPC and its components. So if you want to read more about the VPC, so you can click on info, and then under info here you say learn more. So it can take you to the AWS documentation, and then you can see all the how to create VPC only here, create VPC plus create a VPC plus other VPC resources, VPC configuration option, yeah, so it's always nice to look at the AWS documentation. So if you want to create, like I said earlier, you can create a VPC using a command line interface. And to do that under this documentation, all you need to do, you come here and then you copy these commands. The first thing is this one here. So these are the commands if you are using the CLI. But like today, I said we're only focusing on how we do it manually. In my subsequent videos, we can look into how to create the VPC using the CLI. So we're gonna go back here. So we're creating VPC and more. So when you click on VPC and more, so the first thing you need to do is you give it a name. So I'm just gonna call it PLO Cloud Scale. I'll just say CSG underscore VPC. So Cloud Scale Gateway VPC. I will say underscore demo. So that's the name of this VPC that we are creating. And then the VPC, for every VPC, it must have a CIDR block, and the CIDR block is like the address. So that one also to read about the CIDR block, so which means is the IP address, the IP address. So every VPC has to have like an IP address. The IP address is just like the address that will actually define what that VPC is. And for that, you have two choices. You can do the IPv4 or IPv6, So I can do, you can do actually, but you can do IPv4 and IPv6. But for this demo, we are going to use IPv4, so that's what we're going to do, and we're going to use this 10.0.0.0.0/16. That's what we're gonna just leave it as default, and then the tenancy we're going to leave it at default. But in the production environment, you can decide to choose dedicated tenancy. But for this demo, we are going to leave it at default. And then the number of availability zones. So availability zones, I already talked about what AZs are. AZ mean availability zones. We already talked about that in our previous video. So if you have not watched the previous video about the AWS architecture, go back and watch it. So we can decide how many subnet, how many AZs do we want? Do we want one AZ, two AZ, or three AZ? So let's just say three AZ. We want three AZs, and then a number of public subnets. So every VPC has to have a subnet. You know, a subnet is just a logical isolation. When you take this IP address, you break it down into smaller chunks. It gives you a subnet. So so how many subnets? And subnets, you have two types. You have a public subnet and then you have a private subnet. So for the public subnets, we want three. We want three public subnets. And you can choose to have none, you know, but for this demo, we're going to have three, you know. And then for the private subnet, you actually have the option to choose up to 6 private subnets. But we're going to leave it as 3, the default one. And then NAT gateway. So NAT gateway, again, read about this one. And basically what NAT gateway is, this one stands for network address translation. So basically what this would do is, if you have a VPC that doesn't have, like, let's say, you have a subnet that doesn't have a route to the internet, you use this NAT gateway to help with that route. So NAT gateway, let's say you have an application that resides in your private subnet. So like application that resides inside this private subnet. But those applications, they have to be able to go into the internet to get security patches or to get like update, you know, because the servers, the applications needs to have like a regular update and you know, and security patches. But if you put them in the private subnet, they are not going to be able to do that because they don't have access to the the internet, so that they can download those updates. And the only way they can do that is when you route them with to a NAT gateway. So a NAT gateway will enable them, the resources that reside inside this private subnet, to go to the internet without like transversing, without like anybody else knowing that they are actually in the internet looking for those updates. You know, so it's a secure way of like you getting updates. And mostly you use this NAT gateway. I'm spending a little bit of time on this because it's really important. If you have like let's say for example, you have a DynamoDB, you have a three-tier application, or you have like an application that has like customer information, that has like really sensitive informations, you don't put those in the public subnet. You put them in the private subnet, and that private subnet needs to have like at least one NAT gateway, you know, that will enable that applications to go to the internet. So that's what we have. But for this demo, we are not gonna need it because we are not creating an application here. I'm just showing how you can create a VPC. But if you want, you can select the best practice for high availability zone, for higher availability and fault tolerance, and also for scalability. You want to have like at least like two NAT gateways, and these NAT gateways has to reside within the public subnet. Yeah, even though they are helping this private subnet, but you have to create these ones inside the public subnet. Yeah, so we're just going to leave it at none for now. And then the VPC endpoint. So the VPC endpoint is, if you see here, I say endpoints can help you reduce NAT gateway charges. So what happens is this NAT gateway is expensive, you know, but when you have the endpoint, the endpoint is a way of like the VPC can communicate to other resources. For example, if you can have a VPC endpoint that will directly communicate with an S3 bucket, or that will directly communicate with like let's say you have an application on your like on-prem, so you can have a nice VPC endpoints and that will help with that communication. And it improves security by accessing H3 directly from the VPC. So that's exactly what I just said. So by default, full access policy is used. Yeah. So for this endpoint, we are not going to do, we are going to leave it as none for now. Let's see. So it's always best practice to put tag. Tagging is really important because we'll talk about tagging at some in a subsequent video. But tagging is really important. I just want you, if you are watching this video, to take a note of that. It's really important. If especially when you have to at some point you deal with like cost. So this is it, and then this is how it looks like, the preview. So basically this is the VPC. This is the name that we gave to the VPC, and then it has like the subnet. It has US East 1A, and then US East 1A. It has like 1, 2, and then US East 1B also have 2 subnets. So basically a provision 3 subnets as we define it. 2 in US East 1A, 2 in US East 1B, 2 in US East 1C. Yeah. So, and remember we did like 3 private subnets and 3 public subnets. So what it did for us is that each subnet has like 1 private subnet. Among these AZs, each AZ has 1 public and 1 private subnet. And then in this same architecture, as you can see here, this diagram, we have like a route table. And this route table, basically each subnet, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the subnets, they have like routes. So for example, the public subnet in US East 1A has a route to the internet. And then the private subnet also has a route, and then so they basically they all has a route. They all have a route to the internet. And then you have the internet gateway. Yeah, so the internet gateway it's a very important concept. So remember earlier I talked about the private subnet and public subnet. So for a subnet to be called a private subnet, for a subnet to be called a public subnet, it has to have a route to the internet. Remember this. If you are planning to take the exam, like to take any exam for either networking or AWS in general, remember that for a subnet to be called a public subnet, it has to have a route to the internet. And that's where you attach it to the internet gateway. For a public, any subnet that does not have a route, that does not have an internet gateway, is by default is called a private subnet. So remember that. So I hope this is clear. Just to recap, in this architecture we gave our VPC a name, and then we selected six subnets, three private and 3 public, and we selected 3 AZs, which is availability zones, and then each one has a route to the a route table. And that route table, the role of a route table actually is to route the traffic, and then we have like an internet gateway. Yeah. So we have an internet gateway, and then we have like the VPC endpoint. We didn't do that. We didn't create a NAT gateway. So after you've done all this, you've defined this, and you just come down here and say create. Now you wait for it. It's gonna do its magic, and then it's gonna create for you your VPC. Voila, and that's it. So you created your VPC. So it's all in green here. If there is anything that you do, if you did anything while you are creating that VPC, let's say the IP address is wrong, you will see right here, it will give you an error. But we have created this VPC. Let's look at the VPC that we have created. So this is a VPC that we have created. So we have this VPC and resources. So we have, this is the same architecture that we saw earlier. And then the CIDR, we have 10.0.0.0/16. And then the VPC flow log. We don't have any VPC flow log right now. So the VPC flow log is another concept that we will discuss in our next video. But you can basically create, if I create VPC flow log, it will create for you a VPC flow log. What it is, so to read about it, you can just click on info. A flow log enable you to capture information about the IP traffic going to and from the network and interface in your VPC. So it just basically gives you like an overview. It gives you like what is happening inside of VPC and outside of your VPC. Who is coming in and who is going out. Yeah, so the flow log will give you an overview of that. Yeah, so the VPC is being created here. So if we click on VPC here, now you will notice I have 3 VPC, and this is our VPC here, right here. So this is our VPC. So it is not a default VPC. When you create the AWS account, it will, so this first VPC that you see here, this is my default VPC. So we see this is my default VPC. So that's why it says here, when you look at it here, it says default, it's a no. It's a no. So this is not a default VPC. And then network address use metrics. So we disable this. We disable it. So this is your VPC ID. If we would have created the endpoint, you will see it here. You will see the VPC endpoint, not there. Yeah, it would have shown us the VPC endpoint. So this is the IP address that we gave for this VPC. Yeah, so IPv6 we said no. Main network ACL, there is nothing there. Yeah, so this was just a basic overview of like what VPC, yeah, how to create a VPC. So if you really don't want to deal with all the hassles to create the subnet, to create the VPC, I mean to create the not just like only the VPC, then you just go this route. But the good the more scalable, more for reusability, you want to automate the process, the process of creating a VPC. And that's, go back in my previous video, we talk about automations, you know, like I mentioned earlier, Terraform, CLI, CloudFormation, Elastic Beanstalk, you know, or some other IAC tools. But so this is the manual effort. So this is really for you to learn, for you to get your hands dirty. But for in a production environment, they are mainly probably gonna want you to automate that process. So that's where you write like script, you know, script or code that will actually do that process for you instead of doing it manually. That's all for today. I hope this video is helpful for you, and I wish to see you in our next video. Thank you.